All right, I am getting ready to work on the H-pipe for this new build, so I figured I'd stop for a second and give you a look at what I have on the original build that I did. This is a 2001, so it came with the type of H-pipe that had pup cats in the front as well as the standard cats in the center. So those were just cut out and with straight pipe. And then a little bit farther back, in this case, I had picked up an X-pipe on eBay, nothing special, just an eBay special, cut out the stock H-pipe and put that in place. And then put in a couple of repackable mufflers from Burns Stainless. They're little guys, I think they're like 10 inches or something like that. And then that runs to my axle back, which is a Billy Boat stainless axle back with a couple resonators in it coming out the back. This has worked perfectly fine for me, but I was just kind of curious to see what it would be like to race on the factory H-pipe in comparison. So this time around, rather than put in straight pipe, I'm going to put in some 14-inch resonators from Magnaflow up here in place of the cats, and I will leave the stock H-pipe in place. I understand there's some difference in sound. Performance-wise, I think the difference is nominal, but from what I have read, there might be a little bit more peak horsepower with the X-pipe and maybe a little bit more low-end torque with the H-pipe. I guess we'll see. Like I said, I suspect it's going to be nominal. So anyway, I'm going to get to work on that build, but I just wanted to give you a look at this so that you can understand maybe a couple of different options, although exhaust is wide open, so you can do pretty much whatever you want from the manifold back. But anyway, that's this first option, and I'll get to work on the H-pipe option. All right, well, moving along with my exhaust project, you can see I've gone ahead and cut the catalytic converter out of one of the sides. I decided to leave the other one in while I weld in this muffler, just to try to keep as much shape as I can in this thing. You know, this guy at least holds the part that connects to the exhaust manifold reasonably well. It's got a little bit of movement to it, but not too much. So anyway, I've gone ahead and cut that section out, decided I'm going to go ahead and place these Magnaflows up here in place of the cats. It's probably a mixed bag because on the downside, it's a little bit closer to the manifolds, so the exhaust gases are hotter. There's a little more unburned fuel, things like that, so it might burn up some of the packing that's in there and get louder with time and then have to be replaced. On the positive side, though, I only have to cut out one section and weld in the muffler one time, as opposed to putting a piece of straight pipe in place here and then trying to do something a little farther back. So anyway, that's the route I chose to take. This particular side, you can see one rear oxygen sensor bung here. The other oxygen sensor bung sits here. It's a little bit farther back, and it's right at the edge of where I wanted it. So to be abundantly cautious, I guess you can kind of see here where this piece is cut out. I went ahead and I cut off the bung to get down to the pipe, and then did a little bit of fitting with the muffler to see where I needed to be. And you can see I ended up just cutting right along where the hole was drilled for the bung, and that meant that I had to grind off a little bit of the weld over here. But that left just enough for these 20-inch mufflers to be able to slide over the top of this guy here and give me a little bit of extra room just to weld onto, so it's not a straight butt connection. Of course, up here in the front, this one will be a butt connection, but you can see it's nice and thick because it's double wall. The other thing I did, though, is I cut a little bit farther into the flange for the catalytic converter, so you can see I'm actually into the weld, which is why that's so thick. Could have cut here, but it would have put me a little bit farther back, towards the front over here with the back of the muffler, and I just didn't really want to deal with that. So here, cutting a little bit farther into the weld gave me a little bit more to weld into, since this is going to be a butt connection. So I'm feeling pretty good with that. I guess the other thing to note is there's a little bit of an angle going on here, so this does not just shoot straight up to this. It's got a little bit of an angle to it. And so also had to cut a little bit of an angle into my muffler, which you can kind of see there. So I just cut a little angle into that flange, since it's going to be butt welded up to it, to get it try to get it as close as I can. So anyway, that's it. Gonna start cleaning up this metal and then get this guy tacked into place. All right, well, I went ahead and threw this H-pipe up before tacking things into place just to get a feel for how everything was going to sit. I'm kind of glad I did because there's a couple of things I don't like about it. So first off, a bit of orientation, right? So this can is 14 inches from front to back, and then the rear tubing or flange is 3 inches and the front is 3 inches. So that gives us about 20 inches tip to tip. And so you can see here, I'm just sitting about 2 inches back too far. And basically what that ends up doing is it ends up putting the rear of the can just really, really close to where the tunnel pinches down. And so I'm not in love with that for a couple reasons. You know, one is even though I'm running on AMT mounts in the front of this car, it still will have a little bit of movement, and it's pretty likely that that's gonna bang into the tunnel from time to time. It's also gonna increase the amount of heat transfer that I get into the tunnel, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I'm not in love with it. The other thing I don't like about the way this is sitting is that because I cut out this little rise right here that you see where I still have the stock catalytic converter in place, it leaves the can sitting a bit lower than I would like. So if you get up here, you can kind of see, just shoving the phone up to the bottom of the car, how much it's hanging down compared to, say, like the front. And so it's still hanging down about a ½ inch farther than the catalytic converter did. But in the back, it's a little bit too much. And I'm pretty sure this is gonna end up striking the ground if I roll over a curb or something like that out on the track. So what I'm thinking is that I would like to cut off the vast majority of this front flange and bring the muffler forward 2 to 2.5 inches so that I can actually clear the can in the back and then take the rise out of this, you know, from the stock H pipe, cut that off from the cat that I already cut out, and see if I can fashion that back here a little bit so that I can raise the back of the Magnaflow to get that up off the ground just a little bit. I'm not sure what the difference is there, ½ inch to 1 inch, something like that, but I think any little bit will make a difference. So I'm gonna monkey around with that and see if I can get these cans to fit a little bit better inside of that, that opening for the cats. All right, just checking back in. I've got everything welded in. I should have taken a video while I had it up in the car, but I had everything up in the car, tacked everything into place so that it wouldn't move, and then pulled it out so I could finish up welding. So anyway, like I mentioned, what I ended up doing was cutting that front approximately 2 inches off of the muffler and then welded this guy in. This is stainless to stainless, so typically you would TIG that, but I don't have a TIG welder and I'm not much of a welder to begin with, honestly. So anyway, I just bought a little spool of 308L for the front, and I didn't have Trimix. It was horrifically expensive out here, so I just used the 75/25 gas for shielding, and it worked okay. Not great, but okay. And then in the back, I cut that rise out like I was talking about from the catalytic converter, and then ended up having to cut off a bit more of the H-pipe in the back so that I could get that to fit back. Here, this is stainless to aluminized mild. So I used, again, with the spool gun, some 309L for that, for going stainless to mild. Again, with the 75/25, because that's what I've got. And it worked okay. Again, not the cleanest, but it worked okay. And then back here, I did spot weld the pipe together, or butt weld it together, and then grind it down. And then I took the sleeve that I cut off from the front of the muffler, and I just used that as a coupling to slide it over the top and then weld it on just for some additional strength as well. So anyway, pretty happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and finish cutting out this passenger side catalytic converter now, and then get it back in the car, get everything tacked back up, and then I'll finish welding up that side. All right, well, everything's all finished up. It's back into place. I've got my passenger side muffler welded in, just like I did on the driver's side. Everything came out pretty clean, and it tucked in nicely, so you can kind of see how it's sitting up there now, pretty well up into the space where the catalytic converters were. So those 14-inch cans actually fit in there near perfect if you just take off that front flange. So happy with how that came out. Over here on the passenger side, you'll see I did really exactly the same thing. It's just that this one's sitting a little bit farther back. And that is because of where the rear O2 bung was sitting. It just made it so I wasn't able to put the cut in the same spot. So I chose to just keep the bung and then go ahead and install a plug, which I had sitting around, so that's all closed off. I've got these guys fixed in my tune anyway. So not much going on there. And then kind of towards the back, I've got my turn downs in place right now. I will come back in a bit. I've got an axle back that I'm gonna end up installing. I generally just keep these turn downs in here in case I get rear-ended or something and need them. But most guys run turn downs and don't even bother with an axle back. I just like to throw the exhaust out of the back of the car. So I'll come back around and get those installed later on. But for the time being, I'm actually pretty happy with how these came out.